Spain 2, England 1. The right team won the tournament. I don't think anybody would really argue that, but it's still a sickener for us England fans, Jim.
It is. I think most neutrals before the game, if they had to predict the outcome, would have gone for a very similar, an identical result and possibly even a similar scoreline. It's not really a shock. There's no sense of what if, really, is there? Which is actually, it makes it a bit easier, doesn't it? I think this one's a lot easier to take than the last Euros, just because of the nature of penalties and how dramatic it is, and obviously you get the players in the spotlight who missed. But this was a very, very different type of game, and England fell short in the way that we were kind of exactly ready for them to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair to say, Luke.
Yeah. I'm still reeling from the fact that we haven't done like 5 minutes of mucking about. We got straight into it. That's how serious we are today. That's how big a result it is.
Well,
yeah, look, I'm proud of what England achieved. They've done amazingly to play the maximum amount of games you can play in 2 European Championships in a row. I totally agree with Jim's assessment around the game itself. I feel strangely fine about it. I felt a lot more gutted in the other kind of
3 years ago.
Well, not just that, but every Southgate tournament, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think that we've basically gone from laughing stock on the international stage to the nearly men of the international stage. And that is an upgrade, however small.
Yeah.
It's not the upgrade we all wanted.
It's a significant upgrade.
Yeah, but it's there. So look, I don't think you can. I don't want to be mistaken for being churlish or kind of or unfair to anything that Spain have achieved. I'll be totally honest with you now. When the draw for the knockout stage was made, I honestly thought, and I said it on the show, I think the winner of that Spain-Germany game will win the tournament. Right, and that's what's happened.
Yeah. I think everyone would the winner will come from that side of the draw.
Sure, and what Spain have been able to do by beating, Germany and France and England and all these teams that really were fancied beforehand, they're well worthy winners. And obviously we're going to come on to the game, but I'm still proud of what England have achieved. And for them to be dining at the top table of international football and belong to be there and making a good go of it, I think it's something to be proud of, because 10 years ago this summer, we were sitting there.
Well, that's right.
When Roy Hodgson was telling us that, a 0-0 against Costa Rica in a tournament in the World Cup that we'd already been knocked out of was something for the fans. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
that's how far we've come. Not digging Roy Hodgson out individually, but that's how that's been. And now we expect to go there and compete, and we expect to go there and do well. And teams fear us, and so we should be proud of that. But ultimately, I'd love to have been sitting here saying the whole fabric of the English football, the whole narrative we've been used to since we were born, has been ripped up and entirely changed. Now it's a brave new world. But I can't do that, so I won't.
Yeah, and I think when you look back at this tournament in particular, given everything that has gone wrong, from a form, a fitness, a personnel sense, to be in the last 5 minutes of the championship with still a chance of winning it, it doesn't feel like it now.
No, sure.
But I think in time we'll feel like above par, actually, rather than below. I totally agree in Spain being the team that deserved to win the tournament, and that is not a given. I would say in a European Championship, particularly to a lesser extent in a World Cup, the best team not only doesn't always win, but rarely wins, which I think has given a lot of England fans hope, really, over the last couple of rounds in terms of how they've played in this tournament rather than the players that they actually have at their disposal. But having said that, where I would slightly differ from what Jim said about the match itself, I thought Spain would win before the game. I also said that if England could get through the first half, when Spain would really go at them, then they would be well in it. But actually, the first half went perfectly, I would argue.
Totally.
And the second half, the way that it started is what really won the game.
Totally right.
Yeah.
Completely spot on.
Yeah. So obviously, to give a bit of admin, Spain, first country to win the European Championships 4 times. England, the first nation to lose consecutive men's finals.
Which of those records would you prefer, do you reckon?
Well,
It's just nice to be be there, isn't it?
Get mentioned in the same
nice to be in the
sentence.
conversation when it comes to records.
Exactly.
Southgate made the call to start Luke Shaw at left back, and England didn't play the 3-4-2-1 that they'd played in the game against Switzerland. I mean, it was very fluid, actually. It was quite nice to see England doing that.
Yeah.
Attacking with the ball, without the ball. There was a lot of shape changes, if you like. But Luke Shaw starting, I mean, considering he not started a game since February and so on, in that first half he stood up to Yamal pretty well.
He did brilliant. Sorry, Jimmy, I was just going to say it's a real standout point to make because, and we should talk about England in the first half because I thought they were excellent. But the way Shaw dealt with Yamal was it was the first time this tournament you see a really experienced top level fullback. Forget all the fact that he's been out of football for ages. Really look at a teenager like that and go and make him look like he's not got his strength. And no one else did that this tournament. Yamal had no real weaknesses for a player so young until he came up against Shaw, where he just couldn't get any change out of him. And it felt to me like I didn't think he looked any worse a player. I just thought he looked physically a far less impressive kid, which of course he is because he's only just 17. So that was a massive credit to Shaw for that. I also thought this, weirdly enough, because we're talking about this when England have lost a final and it's gutting, obviously. But weirdly enough, it won't transpire this way. The conversation around it won't ever be like this. But I want to make the point here and now that if you don't think that Gareth Southgate is tactically astute enough, or him and Holland can't do tactical stuff with the players they've got, and you think it could be a lot better with someone else managing, that's fine. You're entitled to that opinion. But you can't watch that first half and say that wasn't tactically brilliant. England was so compact. They were so adept at dealing with a more threatening attacking side than them, and they gave Spain no change whatsoever.
I mean, they were flinging in like aimless crosses by the end of the half.
Well, Nico Williams had to go to the other flank to find the ball. There's all sorts going on.
It's not Southgate's fault that a number of the England players, their touches and their passes were actually pretty poor. And definitely on the rare occasion England did get into Spain's half, it was a bad touch. It wasn't the way the pass wasn't quite there. You can't blame Southgate for that.
That was Spain's press, wasn't it? Basically.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what Spain did. And on the other side, Carl Walker had a great first half against Williams, of course. And it was. I mean, Southgate said before the game, Jim, England are going to have to be perfect tactically. And in that first half, I think everyone thought, OK, England didn't look like they were ever going to score, but staying in the game and being that team of moments, as we've often sort of said, you thought, well, OK, if you can keep doing this.
Well, they were certainly in the postcode of where the goal is, in a way that, only really appeared in England's game in the latter stage of the tournament. And also, suddenly the left side was available for use, wasn't it? I thought Shaw was good in an attacking sense as well. He had a really, really excellent game in the first half, and it just opened England up a little bit more out there. He really he led and took responsibility in a way that was absolutely necessary.
He was really missed. When you saw that, you thought he'd been missed for
very much
other parts of the tournament. And
I just thought you might not like how England play. You might go into that, watch that game as a fan and go, I want England to go at Spain. I want England to show their weapons. I want England to do this. I want England to do that. Which, in my personal view, would be crazy because you get opened up. And actually, we saw them get opened up as they had to come out. But if you don't like it, that's fair enough. But you can't say that first half wasn't a brilliant, not a masterclass. Well, possibly
no, it's not a masterclass because they never score. They never look like scoring.
But I mean, defensively though, they reduced Spain to what Andy's talked about there. That was really a kind of a dictionary definition of how you stay compact against a team like Spain. And the problem was, as Andy's already alluded to, the problem was they came out in the second half and they weren't switched on. In that one moment, they got punished. And then the problem is that completely tears everything up because you go a goal down.
I don't want to blame it on the pundits. I mean, there's plenty of time to do that later, of course. But the bit where Rio Ferdinand's talking at half-time when Rodri goes and Martin Thuber-Mendy comes on for him as well. This is a massive blow for Spain. This is a massive blow for Spain. But actually, Rodri had one of his least effective games of the tournament in the first half, which is a massive credit to England, and I would say particularly to Phil Foden, who kept a good eye on him. I would have expected Bellingham to be on him. We talked about this last week, didn't we, Marcus?
And actually, Bellingham's defensive work in the first half was really, really good as well.
Yeah.
I think a big part of why the performance was so compact, and also perhaps why, as you say, Marcus, they never looked like scoring, was players doing a job on Rodri, essentially.
Yeah, I agree. And I just think when Rodri goes off, there's maybe, and as you said, it all had to be perfect tactically, and it was in the first half. And maybe there's a bit of a group exhale when Rodri goes off at half time. Yeah. And Thuber-Mendy, who is not a better player than Rodri, but is definitely more mobile and finds a lot of angles. Straight away, he had a bit of freedom. He had that bit of space, and that was at the genesis of the first goal.
Yeah, you're right. I mean,
and he played very well as well.
Yeah, to mention Bellingham was on the left side of a 4. At times it was 4-4-1-1. Again, it was very fluid, and it was good to see England playing like that. And I think the plan probably, would have been like keep them at arm's length, and you've got to keep doing that, and then maybe as the game goes on in the second half, you make some more progressive substitutions and you go for it.
That's what you got to do.
But it didn't work out like that. Of course,
there was a momentary lapse in the grind set.
It was, and when Williams scored. It was great from Spain. They sort of dragged England one side and the other, and it was the first time Williams had just got a bit of room from Kyle Walker. And when he scored, it looked like it was going to be 2, maybe even 3. It looked like Spain were going to... And there was some funny comments from the pundits. They said, England only really woke up when they went a goal down. It's like, no. Spain actually probably should have killed England off. Yeah. Let's be honest.
Very quickly afterwards, another chance.
It seems ridiculous to aim any kind of criticism at them, and it's not a criticism, more of an observation, but they would have been disappointed, I suppose, that they didn't kill them off, because it could have been 2. Pickford was called into action. Olmo, I think it was, who missed a chance, scuffed one wide. And it all just went crazy. And that's when England actually had to try and regain a bit of composure and defensive cohesion, which I suppose they just about did. But when it goes like that, Spain, their tails were up. And as you said, Luke, that's when it was kind of ripped apart. And it's like, oh, bloody hell, how are we going to get back into this?
Yeah, and I actually thought one person we haven't mentioned yet that we have to mention, as much as, it might sound a little bit kind of unfair and a bit harsh, we have to mention Harry Kane. I mean, Harry Kane's performance was anonymous, almost entirely non-existent, and that's the one kind of glaring thing that when Southgate talks in his comments after the game about how when you play against a team like Spain, you have to use the ball sensibly and you have to keep it when you win it back. The reason they weren't able to do that, not the only reason, but the main reason, was Harry Kane. Everything broke down. He couldn't stick the ball to him. He couldn't relieve the pressure. It's so important if you're going to play like that. As good as England were in the first 45, it's so important if you're going to play like that you've got a guy up front where the ball sticks to him.
There was no outlet.
No outlet at all. And it's easy to
huge pressure on the defence and the midfield to see it come straight back.
Exactly. It's easy to be wise after the event because Southgate's got a big call to make there. He's literally sitting there thinking, Watkins did what he did. Watkins could occupy these centre-backs, but Harry Kane is the greatest England scorer in history, is the captain.
It's an impossible decision.
Totally. And he has to make one. So I totally understand that. And he made the one he made. And England did look much better when Kane came off. Look, I don't know if it would have been different if he had picked a different player. I feel like, as I said to you guys on WhatsApp, I feel like, weirdly enough, that here and now, Ivan Toney is better at doing a peak Harry Kane impression than Harry Kane is.
So well, in this tournament,
yeah. So I wonder whether that would be would have been an option. I know when Watkins came on, it looked a lot better. But that to me, if you were going to pinpoint a moment or an area where it was where England kind of fell apart, it was really that Kane probably had his worst game of the tournament.
But Southgate is always accused of being indecisive, whereas he made the call on that relatively early. Early enough that Watkins could still influence the game.
Yeah.
And when Palmer came on, it was early enough to still influence the game. I mean, you talk, Marcus, about it being a tournament of England moments and England being a team of moments. The Cole Palmer goal was a moment, not just because, it's a moment that should be cherished and was a really exciting moment that made you think, exactly.
That's what I was doing in the living room. I was rubbing myself. I'm not in that way, Andy. You have to watch the YouTube
to do that as well.
Yeah.
Only for the Patreon.
Yeah. But weren't we all rubbing ourselves when that went in?
Oh, for sure.
We were.
For sure. But it didn't really come as a crescendo, did it? It was just a moment that just arrived like that.
Actually, to be fair, both of Spain's goals felt like that as well, didn't they? Just very, very quick moves that led to a little moment of magic. And I'm so glad that we had that moment at least. It always felt like it was going to be difficult, but to get back in it late on and think, okay, we're still alive in the tournament here. You want that feeling to last as long as possible, and we at least had that moment. I think part of me does think that when the dust settled after that a little bit, they had too much of an eye on extra time.
Well, I had about 10 when that Cole Palmer goal went in. I had about 10 seconds of thinking we won't be denied here. This is happening every game.
Yeah, you do think here we go.
That rapidly dissipates.
Well, again, I think people thought when Cole Palmer scored, it's like, right, England take the initiative. But again, it's easier said than done. And actually, this is this Spain side. We spoke about this when they beat Germany in the quarterfinals. It goes to extra time when they'd been defending. they look like they can go, right, okay, we've tried defending it, okay, we need to go and score again. And they do. And I think that it's too simplistic to say that England, Spain were there for the taking and all this kind of stuff. I think Spain were basically...
Maybe for about 4.5 minutes.
Yeah, possibly.
After that goal, after that equaliser.
Yeah, it's very, very difficult. And I know England, Declan Rice has the header and Gade, it was cleared off the line. And
that was the moment, really.
Yeah, I mean, and that possibly could have taken it to extra time. But even then, I would have still fancied Spain to go, right, we'll beat them in
and that more dynamism. I think that's a huge part of it. I mean, the thing is, all this, we should be taking the bull by the horns, is predicated on everyone being at peak.
It's also bullshit because Spain are better. Spain are better.
Which is not true. Like you have to ask how much. And you said if England had gone from the start, it would have been asking to be torn apart. And I would agree with that. And I think that's the same going into the closing stages as well. I think having hope the longer it goes on, even if you think that is a Southgate plan, I don't think that's a terrible plan because the thing is, if they fully go for it from the equaliser, you look at the best players on either side, who's got most in the tank? Well, it is those Spanish players. It's Nico Williams and Lamine Yamal who have the most in the tank.
And they've also had so much of the ball that they're just fresher, aren't they?
Oh, I mean, it's knackering.
It's baked into the game plan.
Gary Neville said this, and it doesn't need to take Gary Neville to say this, as we all know, but if you don't have the ball and you're chasing it, it's exhausting. And that's why after the first half, it's a shame they couldn't keep it going, England, keep a clean sheet for a bit longer, or not concede for a bit longer, because it really is tiring. And they didn't have the outball really. Okay, Watkins came up, but by that point England are a goal down. But I just felt that in that first half we saw that England actually the counter attack was really the only way we were going to try and get at Spain. It's easier said than done, but you're not really going to counter when Foden's having to be quite disciplined and do a job on Rodri, Bellingham sort of defending a bit deeply, and Kane is as we've talked about. If you had a more mobile forward and maybe. Sorry to sound like a broken record again, but someone like, say, Anthony Gordon up there, more of an outlet. But then, of course, you sacrifice someone who's playing more defensively. But breaking quickly is something that England haven't done in this tournament, and it's something that they probably needed to do against Spain. But again, you mentioned this about Southgate's selection. Does he really keep Kane out the team? Is he going to drop Bellingham or Foden and all these players? Not really. So if you wanted to counter quickly, you'd have to make a big decision here or there.
And he's right to say that it was an impossible decision.
Yeah.
And I think the way England approached it was absolutely fine. The problem is, the word we keep using is moment, right? And it was a moment. England didn't come out for the second half and maintain that intensity. Well, because what Andy said about Rodri was part of it. I actually had that same thought myself at the time, or because it was just Spain are a good team and England weren't quite on their toes from the start of the second half. But the way England approached it, I'm always using boxing analogies, I know, but forgive me. If you're going in there against a bigger, better boxer, right, or someone who's a more technical boxer than you, then it's pretty standard to get on their chest and take them into deep water.
You want a slugfest.
Yeah, drag them into deep water and stuff. And England approached it in that kind of way, and I was fine with that. I felt like what they were going to try and do was probably do another 15 or 20 minutes of that in the second half, and then see what happened.
Palmer on maybe.
But as soon as Spain score in that way at that time, the whole thing's blown open. Then you're really kind of right. And then to use the boxing thing again, it's the whole Mike Tyson thing. Everyone's got a plan until they get punched in the face, right? What are you going to do now? And Spain proved themselves to be better. And I think the way that they scored their winner was just like, that's the stamp of approval on it. That's us. That's what we do. That was a goal of such great quality, of fine margins to stay onside, a brilliant flowing move that England, to be perfectly fair, in this game didn't look capable of. No. And then you're done and dusted. Yeah. The only way that England could have got back into it was one of those kind of goalmouth scramble set piecey type things, which they almost did, to be fair to them, and they didn't. I feel the same way you feel, Marcus, about the idea that even if we dragged them into extra time, I think you're probably looking for penalties and then you might win.
Oh, let's be honest. If someone had offered me penalties before the game, I'd have taken it, which is mad to think.
As I touched on earlier, it sort of feels to me like that was sort of in the players' minds a little bit while they were trying to reset after the goal.
Be a bit weird if someone just went, we're just going to check with this podcast host.
Yeah.
Do you want to do penalties? And then we're just doing penalties.
I'd have done knockout Wembley.
Look, doubles.
Doubles, yeah.
There is too much football and we need to find ways to reduce it.
Exactly.
Rule out any
and for that, imagine that, Pogac, and for that reason, we now cross over to Marcus Speller in the Ramble studio. studio.
Yeah.
Do
He's
you
got
want
the
penalties now?
Is he going to press the penalty button?
The golden buzzer. Yeah.
Ivan Toney's like, yes!
Show some fucking respect.
Yeah.
So I think that there is. Do you think there's an element, or certainly an argument to be made that actually England invited a little bit of unnecessary pressure on themselves with the tactic of Pickford going long so often?
Well, this is
because I get the idea is to beat Spain's press, but essentially
You're giving them the ball straight back.
Exactly, yeah.
I
So
agree with
actually,
you.
you just go the long way round of them having the ball again.
But Jimmy, this is a far deeper problem.
Well, I think it's an interesting detail, though.
It is, but it's symptomatic of a far deeper problem with English football, and it has been for many, many years. I said before the tournament when we were doing Lions Watch, I said that one of the teams that the team I always fear England playing is Spain. And we were talking about this when they were fifth favourites, I think. But I said I still, when Spain played Germany in that quarterfinal, I really wanted Germany to win because I still had hope England would reach the final, which they did. And I just thought, not Spain, because Spain play England so well. The way they press high, the way they can play in compact spaces,
Yeah.
We've seen it so many times. The only time England managed to do something against Spain was in that Nations League a long time ago now.
It's a bit of a Hades Comet kind of result.
Yeah.
Everything clicked for them.
That was the real quiz, though.
That was, Andy, indeed. But
We'll always have that Brussels. We'll always have it.
But what England were far more mobile in that game, but what England do, as you say, Jim, they just sort of play it long, and we've seen poorer sides than Spain do that to England, even in this tournament. And England, even with Mainu in there, who was, it was a difficult evening for Mainu as it was for all of England's players. They are not as confident as Spain are in receiving the ball, in getting out from the back, and it results in Pickford playing it long. And I think that in English football, that the long ball is still, it may be a last resort now, or it may be way further down the list of options, but it's still that option. Whereas in Spain, they would say, no, you've got to pass it until you get this right. And if you lose matches, you've got to do this properly.
Yeah, but that's fine. But that's all good, and I understand that. But I don't actually hate that tactic that England did.
No,
No, because I think that I'm not accusing you guys of this, but I think generally speaking, the kind of long ball, in this case, Pickford playing the ball long and relieving the pressure, it's almost seen as a dirty word in football now, basically because everyone's obsessed with Pep Guardiola, right? And that's fine. I understand the principle behind it. If you play it out short, you've got 100% chance of playing it to your teammate. If you play it long, it's basically 50-50, possibly worse than that. I totally understand that. But there is a time and a place to do that. I mean, I think if you're under a lot of pressure, and let me just finish the point, if I may. I think it becomes a much better tactic if you've got someone up there who was going to hustle and bust and win it all.
Yeah.
And far too often, actually, what was happening last night is it was hitting the head of Bellingham and not hitting the head of Kane. Yeah. If you had someone, if Kane at his very peak was up there,
you want Bellingham to receive that, not make the knockdown.
And Bellingham's getting the second ball.
Well, you mentioned
it becomes
Tony.
a totally different tactic, and I don't actually think we should dismiss it out of hand.
Tony's used to that at Brentford, isn't he?
Totally,
But what I was going to say, though, is I'm not talking about necessarily international, but I'm saying in a country like Spain, they drill the players so much to play it out from the back, to be comfortable on the ball, to not do that. That's, again...
But so do England.
Well,
the academy system in England's been like that for years now.
Yeah, I think
you might not be as good at it, but that's the system.
Well, my point
is it's a newer thing, isn't it? Whereas the culture is far more ingrained in Spain.
I don't want to be all tabloidy about this and so on. And I thought, England did equip themselves a little bit better, and we know Spain, but those issues of not being as comfortable on the ball, not being able to play around and be a little bit canny, and maybe a few too many long balls, not as bad as it's been, but those things are still there.
Before Andy comes in, let me just be a bit spicy here, right? Because Jim's original point was about, is it inviting pressure, etc., etc. Like, we all agree that Spain are better than England in this one-off game here. They're better technicians. They've been a better team. They can pass the ball better. So, what do you want England to do then?
Well,
what do you want them to do?
Am I fair in saying that Jim was arguing they were doing it too much, rather than arguing that they shouldn't do it?
But how do you think they should have approached it? The problem is just that Kane couldn't stick the ball to him.
But
there's no outlet.
You're looking at the 90 minutes in which I said I thought England played really well in the first half, and they did. I'm looking at the sort of the bigger picture of with England. It's still symptomatic. When Jim mentioned this, I said, well, it's symptomatic of that deep problem, which I think it is improving, but it's not there yet.
I don't agree with that. I personally just don't agree,
I guess the other side of that is you could say the first half, as excellently as I think all of us in here believed England would play. That's the toll you pay for that, because essentially England are now a possession side. If you look, and it goes to show that there's a massive difference between statistics and analysis of those statistics, because actually if you look at the tournament as a whole, England have more of the ball than Spain.
Totally. We said that beforehand.
But
what was a possession in the final?
Of course, yeah, but that's the point, because they went in thinking we'll give up possession.
Yeah.
So you're having to play a little bit differently to how you would normally play. So I think, of course, there's a massive difference between having possession and having possession with purpose. And the way that Spain move the ball, the pace with which Spain move the ball, convinces you that they actually have more possession than they do. Of all the things that you can judge by the eye test, the hardest thing to judge by the eye test, stats-wise, is possession. Because if a team has possession with purpose, it convinces you that they have more of the ball than they actually do.
Well, in that final, England had just shy of 35% possession.
Which was a decision.
Yeah.
Do you think?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so.
The way they decided to play that first half, it was a decision.
I think the frustration, if you're going to be frustrated about anything, and I don't dismiss your point entirely, Mark. I totally get it. And to be fair to you, you've been consistent in that point for a long old time now, so I totally understand it. For me, I think there's more than one way to skin a cat, of course, as we all know. I think if you had a striker up there, perhaps with someone off him, who could really hustle and bustle, I know it's not fashionable to say so, but we did identify before the game that those two centre-backs for Spain, there's question marks over them. But one of them's playing in Saudi Arabia, one of them's fairly new to the scene. You know, he's no Sergio Ramos. Neither of them are Sergio Ramos, right? Who will stand up to anything. Let's get amongst them. Let's really make it difficult for them. There's no shame in doing that. And England simply didn't do that. I'm not saying the result would have been different, but we have seen in the past worse teams win games.
Yeah.
You know, it does happen.
Yeah.
And we didn't give ourselves a chance to make that happen. But I also agree with Andy. It was the total decision to give Spain the ball in the first half. And it worked for the first half. It was fine.
Well, Southgate said against Spain, you have to keep the ball when you win it back.
Totally,
We were fine
that's the
defensively in the first half, but it takes a lot out of your legs. And he's
Sure,
right.
yeah.
And that's what I mean. England didn't keep the ball very well. And I think that they all often looked overrun. And it's always a thing against Spanish sides. Spanish sides often look like they have an extra man in there compared to English sides. I mean, we know Spain, you know, their teams are phenomenal when it comes to finals. You know, since the turn of the century or 2001, I think you'd have to go back. Would it be Liverpool Alaves?
Yeah, that's
Liverpool,
the one.
That is the one, isn't it? Yeah,
That was in 2001, right?
yeah, and even then, I mean, yeah. Anyway, let's not talk about that. But since then, how many? What is it? 23 or 24 finals out of 24 club sides, and the sides that they've beaten the most amount of times in those finals have been English sides.
Yeah.
Now that's obviously, you know, the English sides have got there. You know, that's why that is. But and I understand with whether it be Man City or Liverpool or whoever it is, you know, the foreign manager, often large foreign players, large contingent of foreign players. But like I say, there is something about Spain having something over England. You know, you even saw it in the Women's World Cup final when you know, it's a footballing cultural thing. And I'm not saying England have to necessarily copy Spain. I think you can take inspiration from a number of different places. And Luke, to your point about there are many ways to skin a cat and win a football match, I also agree with that. I don't think that you can become something that maybe culturally you're not. I think Spain are one of the few countries on earth that have this footballing identity, which took a long time to cultivate,
but they actually didn't use until the final to some degree.
Yeah, and there's a lot went into it, and that the young man Lamine Yamal, you know, like again, you just. What a player is, beats Pele's record for the youngest man to ever play in a major tournament final. When things like that, nobody would have. When they came into the tournament, Andy, you know, you weren't sure about Spain. It's fair to say,
very not sure.
A number of months before the tournament, De La Fuente, there was question marks over him. It's massively clicked for them, and few could have predicted the way it's clicked. You know, sometimes the stars just align. You know,
absolutely no way. And like when you talk about a team being more than the sum of its parts, they are the dictionary definition of that. They've been unbelievable. I think what's really interesting is that De La Fuente is kind of their Southgate.
He is, yeah.
Like because he takes the job, having done the under-17s, the under-19s, the under-21s, and won titles with them before. And there is a sense after Luis Enrique, where's the star quality? You know, and of course he slightly undermines himself at the beginning when after the Women's World Cup last year, he's caught applauding Rubiales in that RFEF get-together, and it makes him look indecisive and weak. And then, of course, they go and lose to Scotland in the qualifiers. And so to have that start and then to build it to where he has now, it's extraordinary. But I think it goes to show, and I'm sure we'll come on to Southgate maybe in the second half, that the ideal coach for your international team is not the biggest name out there.
Yeah.
It's someone who gets it.
And emotionally gets it and is emotionally intelligent, because he is. We've spoken about this. He is this avuncular figure who's brought everybody together, gives a damn. He treats and values everybody really high, in the same. And it's that kind of side of it which he is immaculate in. And also, tactically, he's been great. He's got the team to do it. But also, he sits on top of that pile of all this, talking about this footballing culture. I know people say, well, he's not the same as Southgate because he attacks it, different football tactics. He's coming from a different culture. As I say, the past is different in Spain and all that kind of stuff.
What both of you guys were saying before, actually, about tradition and an identity, a national football identity. He was very clear on that at the start of the tournament. He said, we have to be faithful to our identity. If we're not identifiably Spain, we're not going to get anywhere. Whilst recognising at the same time that almost becoming a pastiche of those characteristics was playing against them in recent tournaments. Now, I think that's the thing, to have an understanding of what you are culturally, but to be able to step out of it on occasion, that's the trick, isn't it? It's very hard to do, but that is the trick.
It's about being flexible within it, really, isn't it? And actually, he is a really nice combination of that tactical flexibility, but also that cultural understanding and the sort of the man motivator. And those players, or those managers rather, I think they are as hard to find as the sort of real top technicians. It's not simply a case of getting sort of the company man in and making it work. And I think this is going to be a really interesting tournament when it's looked back on in the future. I think, obviously, the headline is Lamine Yamal. And I think, actually, because it's been a bit of an underwhelming tournament, isn't it? It hasn't. I don't think it's going to be one that lives long in the memory for a lot of people, unless your country did well in it. And
the purists would be pleased that Spain won, because Portugal, France, and one could argue England for a lot of it sort of disappointed and were a bit too negative.
Yeah, I would think you'd probably say the Netherlands were fairly attack-minded, but
you go back to the groups. Turkey were great, weren't they? I mean, Georgia we enjoyed, but I know what you mean.
But those teams are never really going to win.
No, but I think in previous World Cups, and it's not World Cups, Euros, but Qatar and Russia, those two World Cups were great. It was a lot of goals, and it was very, very exciting.
This hasn't been like that.
No.
And I think actually that might help to sort of cement the legend of Yamal a bit more, because he stands out so much as the memorable thing that happened. And what a tournament from him! I think we were all hoping we might see some flashes of this great player. We've watched him in the Champions League. We know he's an exceptional talent, and he isn't like a regular 16-year-old. But for him to deliver with the manner that he has and the consistency that he has and the effectiveness that he has, he was very obviously one of the best players in the tournament. If you were, if your eyesight wasn't great and you couldn't see how young he was, you would be absolutely flabbergasted to learn his age. He really delivered.
And that's the real testament to him, I think, is this what I talked about earlier. He got no change out of Shaw in the first half. Yet the moment England switched off for a second, 70, 80 seconds into the second half, he's drifting inside, no one picks him up, and he sets up the goal. So,
Shaw does tire as the game goes on, understandably so as well.
Yeah. Right, before we go for a break, something that brought a tiny little hint of a smile to my face this morning was learning that Jordan Henderson hired a van and went on an 8-hour road trip to go and watch the final in Berlin last night. And I saw he was there, but didn't realise he'd gone to such lengths. Yeah,
I saw him on the ITV coverage in the stands. He drove all the way from Saudi. Amazing. Is it one of those vans that they use to educate people about different social issues?
Oh, come on.
Because that's his thing these days.
Was he not driving from Netherlands?
Well, it probably would have been.
Let's give him the glamour. He's the new Andre Villas-Boas, going rallying.
Yeah. I'm not quite sure. I don't think you could rally in a camper van, Andy.
Wouldn't have taken 8 hours from Netherlands, surely. With a big fat dude.
What I don't like about it is he didn't look like a man who'd slept in a camper van. So it must have been
someone drove him.
Pretty luxury one, yeah. Listen, if Spain got any ex-pros turning up to the game in a camper van because they love the lads so much, if the answer's no, then we're the spiritual winners.
I'm not sure it was a camper van. I just think it was a van.
A van, okay.
Yeah.
Like a sort of tour bus.
Could have been
like a luxury tour bus.
By the sounds of it, it sounds like the type of van you'd use to move house.
Right.
Yeah. It probably tells you more about the infrastructure issues in England than it does about anything else. I'm not getting a plane. I'm not going to a British airport at the moment. I'll drive myself.
All right, coming up in the second half, we look ahead to what is next for Gareth Southgate and England. See you in a moment.
I ain't never felt this bad ever.
Welcome back to the Football Ramble, everybody. Thanks to friend of the Ramble Moon for sending us that clip. Seemed very appropriate today, sadly. You can become a friend of the Ramble too by heading over to patreon.com/Football Ramble. You'll get access to the Discord where you can chat with us and other Ramble listeners and get ad-free episodes of the Ramble up front and on the continent.
Andy, you're doing another on the continent later, aren't you, with your European mates?
Yep.
Yeah. Proper announcers over there.
You properly reform partied me there, haven't you?
With your real mates, Andy. Oh, your metropolitan London lefties.
You're going to do Farage's press conference in a minute. You're just going to be sat in a fourth microphone going, boring, 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 throughout OTC.
Are you the journalist that's married to Richard Tice?
It'll be an AI Luke Moore.
It will be. I'll tell you what, I can't wait for that to come in. I'll never have to leave the house.
Oh, blimey. It'd be very
Good
simple.
for everyone.
Indeed. Gareth Southgate said now is not the time to discuss his future, which you can understand.
But that was right after the game.
Yeah. I mean, he mentioned this actually ahead of the game as well, because it's very difficult to start thinking about that. All the focus has to be on the here and now when it is in a tournament. And I think one can't appreciate how mentally exhausting it is being in a tournament. Southgate said that basically, the people are ready to go home, kind of thing. You've been away from your families that long, you've been sort of cooped up, and look, it all sounds great to me, but the reality is that even though it's a kind of a 5-star hotel and you've got all mod cons and games and so on, you're still away. It's still a fake environment.
A month is a long time. A month is enough time to feel like you live in a place.
Exactly, yeah.
And I don't think that's not a draw, is it? I mean, that's not a big draw. That's what he's building up to. It's just the elevated highs, the basement lows, the kind of
it all goes into it, and I mean Southgate's I think was it his wife or somebody said that after previous tournaments he was just so exhausted that they said that around the house he would just be sat there, on the couch, he would be chatting away, and he would just sort of start nodding off and falling asleep. Again, it was just so exhausting.
It's literally like me with my 1-year-old son after a weekend.
And
like me watching Southgate's England.
and so you could only imagine what it must be like. He did say that before the final in the build up to that he would make a quick decision. That suggests to me that he may well not carry on. And I think that this is...
I think the decision was probably about 80% made already, right? And that
probably.
That.
I mean, I think if he'd won the tournament, I think he would have probably stepped down and thought, it's not going to get any better than that. Had they not have reached the final, I think he would have gone another thing. Whereas I can't remember, Luke, I don't want to... But you or I may have said that the only way that he might stay on is if they just miss out and reach the final or something, and he thinks, do I want to have another go? Because he's such a huge England fan as well. He said this. And actually, do you know what? My sadness today is actually, of course I want England to win, but I'm so sad for Southgate.
Yeah.
I really, really am. He's such a thoroughly decent bloke.
Even Roy Keane said he was a great guy, and Roy Keane stamped on him.
Indeed. And when people say, they seem to dismiss the whole decent bloke thing. It's like, no, there's something in that. As I say, his emotional intelligence, his appreciation for English culture and the wider picture when it comes to the history of English football and the England national team have been absolutely crucial to his, if you like, relative success, because they haven't won a tournament under him. The way he's changed things around since he's got there. Again, you may not have liked the style, certainly not this tournament and so on, and you may well think it's time for somebody else. And I don't think that's an unfair opinion. Even if England had won the tournament, I think people could fairly say that.
There's not really a juxtaposition between that. I think it's interesting how a lot of journalists have approached it in the immediate aftermath of this. The sense that, look, he has done a great job, but maybe it's time for a pair of fresh eyes in it. I mean, it's funny. I do get the impression that calling him a decent bloke, and of course you're not doing this, but a lot of journalists and pundits have used that as their sort of cushion before they
stick the boot in.
And absolutely. I think that there's two ways of looking at this, isn't there? The way you could look at it is, do you remember that 1980s, 90s cartoon Dungeons and Dragons?
Oh yeah,
where the little group You always think they're going to get home, but they never do get home because the dungeon master stops them.
Yeah.
And in every single episode, you think, oh, they're
What
going to
happened at the end?
get.
Did they actually get home?
I think they might have done at the end.
Yeah.
But if you think of Gareth Southgate as this
Just a
dungeon
relief
master
to-
type character, he's the one stopping them always getting home.
Yeah.
Right. You could say actually it's not that. It's that he's completely reinvented.
Yeah.
What it means to be an England football player and what the England squad is and all the et cetera, and actually he's just been a bit unlucky, right? He's got to finals, talked about it in the first half 10 years ago. If you fancy it and you're getting a little bit kind of intemperate, go back and watch 2014, right? It doesn't mean he gets a pass forever. Doesn't mean he gets a pass forever. But what it does mean is he's reinvented and elevated it. The FA obviously want him to stay because he's ultimately, in terms of, I'm not talking about England football fans necessarily, but more broadly speaking, he's popular, by which I mean he's very brand safe, and he's not someone who's going to embarrass himself and
He's
embarrass
M&S,
the
isn't
FA. He is. He's very M&S.
He's not going to have a pint of wine and wings.
No, and if he does, he's not stupid enough to fucking get caught on a camera doing it. I don't think pot of wine's really his vibe anyway.
I'd hate it because he'd spill it on his M&S top.
He
and it
would.
stain.
He would. So I think it depends which way you come down on it. I also think I've kind of adjusted my opinion slightly. I think if England had won this, I think he probably would have stayed because he probably would have gone, right,
Do you think?
I fancy a crack at the World Cup with this team. We've now got the monkey off their back. But I think now Andy's kind of point about fresh eyes is an interesting one. But as ever in football, when we talk about these kind of decisions, as a media, we hardly ever talk about who the replacement's going to be. And the justification for him leaving will only be realised if the appointment subsequently is a good one. And if you can't get anyone to do it, or you're taking a massive step back, or more importantly, you are not going to get someone in who fully understands and will execute and take that step further, the culture that's been created, you might as well keep him for as long as you can. Because I don't have I don't have any faith whatsoever that the FA have planned properly for this, and the names that are being put out there by and it will be based on contacts that journalists have and all the rest of it, good quality journalists doing good work, suggests that there may not be a succession plan that we'd all like to see. So you've got all that big mixture that I've talked about there has all got to be taken into account. But I do, in theory, like the idea of fresh eyes, of someone who can accept the culture, really kind of accentuate it, understand what it means, and take it through to the next logical stage. If you can find someone to do that, I wouldn't be against it. At the moment,
it's quite a job description. That
it is. It's really tough, and I think that's what makes it very hard for. And I don't mean this in a jingoistic way. I mean, I personally believe that it should be ring fenced as a citizen of that nation anyway, because the players have to be to an extent. But I think it does make it very hard, not in a jingoistic way, for a Pochettino or a Klopp to do it. I'm not saying they would take it, but I think it's very, very difficult to justify that succession plan when you've had what Southgate's done over such a long period of time. So it may not sound that popular, but unless all those things can be satisfied, which I'm not convinced of because the FA are basically broadly a joke, I would keep Southgate in situ.
I think we find ourselves in a pretty unique position, actually, as followers of England, in that the succession plan is obviously so important, but generally, especially in latter years, the succession is involved ripping everything up and starting it again and trying to sort of create something new and get a consistency and a culture in. And that is there now. And I think it's so important that certain things stay on. Now, England sort of, getting better at penalty shootouts and things like that is not by accident. It's by very, very detailed design. And as you allude to there, Luke, the FA have a responsibility to keep a lot of this structure and a lot of these processes in place so that they can say to the next manager, look, we had a problem with this before. This is how we fixed it. We found that this method works for us. It's very important to us that you, as the manager coming in and as the figurehead, keep this in place and at least attempt to apply it within your own style.
It's almost like having an FA civil service.
Very much so. And I think that's important. And it's important to just be, to be modern about these things and have a lot of different processes in place to affect these outcomes, because if we just completely change it again, we will lose so much. Now, a lot of the criticism that Southgate has had is like, oh, it's been boring, we scraped through and this, that and the other, and like us scraping through and getting to two finals and having the success we've had under Southgate in terms of going to like the latter stages of tournaments, it doesn't come from nowhere. It comes from all these details, and those details they need to stay there. It's so important.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think that You said the FA are broadly a joke, Luke. I understand.
Do you want me to double down on that? I'm happy to.
They'll go for Pep Guardiola, won't they? They'll be in his ear now.
But then what Jim's just said there, actually, the FA have to take a little bit of credit for. But the FA, this has been a long-term strategy, and the FA were looking at the tournaments in the 2020s as ones for England to win. That was the plan, and they've obviously come mightily close. England have come mightily close.
I'm cynical about this, but I'll come back to you at the end of it.
But the progress has been there, and Southgate has been a part of that. But we're all talking about Southgate in a certain way, and I love the man. I really, really do. But Andy, England were favourites for this tournament. And you look at the players that they have. I've said this before and I'll say it again. I actually don't think England necessarily had the most balanced of squads because of the left-hand side and so on. But that is because Southgate picked those players.
Yeah, and that's to do with planning.
Exactly, yeah. So he's not without his criticisms. I mean, and also England being on that side of the draw was mightily helpful. And I understand, you said it before, Jim, that Southgate takes a lot of flack for losing knockout games in a different dimension or something, when it actually won in reality. But England in the 2018 World Cup, in Euro 2020, despite beating Germany on the way, and obviously this one, they have had favourable draws as things go. And whenever they've played, and I said this before the game, I said, Southgate, that elite level opposition, he's not really done it in a major tournament. When they come up, and obviously the trophy win, and once again England couldn't quite do it. So I said he's punched through a lot of ceilings, but there's that one which he just hasn't quite managed to do, and that with the players England have is a little bit disappointing.
Yeah, that's true, and I guess going back to your point of Germany in 2021, I mean I would slightly disagree with that because that was Germany in name, not in reality.
Sure.
That was not good Germany by any stretch of the imagination.
England have struggled with even that before, though.
I mean, it seems futile, though, if we start arguing whether that was a big win or not. It doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
No.
Sure, and it would be an exception rather than a rule, even if you did take that as a big win. Look, I don't think anyone out there is saying Southgate is the perfect coach, and I have sympathy for those who are saying he has been excellent to get England to a certain point. Now, from his perspective, I wouldn't want to carry on at this point. I mean, 8 years of managing England, I don't think you can get your head around how incredibly draining that is. And it was funny, I was talking to my wife about this because she was saying about all the criticism that he's borne in this tournament. And it's a lot for anyone. And then you extend that to 8 years. And I was saying, well, the England job has always been thus, really. And explaining that perhaps to younger listeners, Sir Bobby Robson, who's thought of as an absolute monument of the English game. Yeah. The criticism that he received directly before Italia 90, which is one of England's best tournament results, was unbelievably harsh and personal.
Totally.
And much like Gareth Southgate, he took the high road and he remained very dignified through that.
And those people, by the way, those journalists that treated Robson the way they did should be thoroughly ashamed of themselves. Some of them are still working in the media now and spend no time at all mentioning it or apologising or anything like that. And they've done that all the way through their careers. He was treated appallingly badly, so bad, in a way that these days would be seen, even for Southgate, if you think he's getting a lot of stick now, like just totally unacceptable.
But it's been completely forgotten. Yeah. And, I think it'll be interesting when Southgate finally does go to see how he's seen in 5 years' time or 10 years' time or whatever. Maybe this is just the start of his career. Maybe he gets to go on and do something else from here in the club game. Who knows? But what I would say is, like you guys were saying, in terms of a replacement, be careful what you wish for. Because some of the names out there, like Eddie Howe, for example, who seems, I think globally, would we say the best English manager on the market?
It's fair to say, I think.
Yeah, I don't think that's unreasonable.
No.
I think, and a lot of people...
he'd be mad to take it, but...
Yes, and a lot of people would immediately welcome that and say, well, you know what, he's going to play more gutsy football. He's going to play more high-tempo football. And that might be the case. There's also a strong case that won't work, because you have to look at those players are going to end up at the end of every season having played too much football. Yeah. You're going to have an injured Kane, a knackered Bellingham, no fit left-backs. All those things are not an accident. They are the products of the football culture that you know, we
Andy,
all love to an extent.
Can England not do that on a 3 p.m. kickoff in Orlando for the next World Cup?
Yeah.
Humidity at 80%. Come on, high pressing. What's the barrier?
Actually, the interesting thing
20%
is
possession.
one of the major criticisms of Eddie Howe, which I don't think is really discussed nationally, because let's be honest, nationally people aren't that bothered about Newcastle apart from talking about the ownership. If we're talking about how they actually play, a huge criticism of him, and perhaps one of the reasons behind their injury list, is because he demands high intensity all the time. So he would demand the high intensity sort of football that a lot of pub pundits want to see. But can the team do it? I mean, maybe you see bits of better football, but do you get a better tournament result?
Andy, as a
I
king,
think that's a big
England
question.
did this in Qatar. They played more high octane stuff because it was halfway through the season.
Exactly.
As the king of the pub pundits, do you mind if I come in here? Look, Eddie Howe's attractive because he seems like a turbocharged Gareth Southgate, like very similar in manner. Seems like a classy guy, very nice and polite, very even tempered, etc., etc. So
hair.
Yeah, I get that. But to go back to the whole point earlier about the FA, because we are supposed to be talking about Southgate and the succession here, if there is one. Look, the best. I know that the FA are a bunch of faceless suits, and it's easy to have a go at them because there's no real kind of victim there. I'm not calling out.
Even if it is easy to have a go at them, you've done a very good job.
Well, I'm going to carry on because I think the best praise you can reserve for the FA in this era here of unprecedented relative success, as we have to say, because they didn't win anything, is that they've gotten out of the way, right? And you mentioned it there, Marcus. You talked about this point about how the FA had a plan to win this and to win that. I mean, you and I could put that plan together, and by the end of the day, it's a plan, right? You talk about what you talk about. This is the ambition. This is how we're going to achieve it. It's all theory, and anyone in this room could do that. The reality is that Southgate, who they didn't even want, who they hired reluctantly, has gone there and been essentially the start and the end of what's happened. It's all come from him. The amount of times, Marcus, you and I have sat in here in Lions Watch and other shows and said, Southgate's instilled or introduced this, or the idea of a history, or, you know, presenting people with a cap, or what it means to wear the English shirt. That's my big concern, is that it all comes from him. It's not been like a couple of guys above him at the FA have all sat down together and executed it all. The thing that Andy said earlier, I agree with him, be careful what you wish for, because all the stuff that the pub pundits want may not even be possible for all the reasons he said. And the least we can ask for is for a country like ours to have such a storied history in the game to at least subscribe to a set of values that unquestionably Southgate has instilled within the whole setup, and that has to continue after he's gone. And so far, the facts are, forget my opinion, the facts are so far that's not really been seen. There's nothing. It's the easiest PR win in the world to come out and say, here's what we've done, here's what we're going to do, don't worry about it. Maybe they will do that, but I don't think they will.
Well, can I put a hypothetical to you, if can channel positive Peter? What the pub managers want really is, to it be like Southgate in terms of the culture and the positivity and the players buying into it, but the football to be more attacking. And even if it's not, Pep Guardiola's Barcelona for 90 minutes, just to, set the agenda, take the front foot a bit more and be the aggressor in games. Do we think there's someone out there that can do that?
It's a good question. It is a good question. But I
like I said, I think the calendar is stacked against that. I don't think it's really got that much to do with the coach.
And as Marcus is saying, Marcus has said this consistently, to be fair to him, they did that in Qatar.
Sure.
And they didn't win. And there could be different reasons for that, but I did do it.
Yeah, and look, I mean, according to the bookies, if Southgate does step down, it's a three-horse race between Graham Potter, Eddie Howe and Mauricio Pochettino. And Potter people will probably think more of the same.
Which isn't necessarily the worst thing, as for reasons we've touched on.
Well, yeah, Eddie Howe we've discussed, and Pochettino again. That would be. I think perhaps his name is being linked because he's linked himself. I'm not sure how many people would be convinced with an Argentinian leading out an England team potentially against Argentina in a World Cup. I think they'd certainly have something to say about that in Argentina. But anyway, we shall see. I mean, the FA have offered or are trying to convince Southgate to stay for the 2026 World Cup. And some of the players were saying that they'd love him to stay on for that. His current deal ends at the end of the Nations League games, and would be he would leave before qualifying begins for the World Cup. So if he was to leave now, it would actually be before his contract was up. So we shall see. I mean, whatever happens, I think that actually. When all said and done, I think England actually in this tournament gave a slightly better showing than what we thought they might do when it was in the early rounds. Southgate takes credit for turning it round. I mean, in those early games, there was a lot of pressure, there was a lot of this, that's, and the others, and they managed to keep it going. And when all's said and done, I said this last time when Italy beat England in the final. Did England give you a bit of cheer? And they did. We have the Jude Bellingham bicycle kick. We've got Saka's penalty and the smile that came after it. We've got that wonderful Ollie Watkins goal, which we'll always remember.
Yeah, definitely.
And those moments will always be memorable and so on. But soon enough, we'll turn our attention back to club football and the daily grind of the Premier League or the Championship or wherever you watch your team will commence. And the memories of Euro 2024 will fade into the background. And we will go again.
Yes.
We will go again, because that's what we do. And hopefully in a couple of years, England will have qualified for the World Cup and be fresh to battle the humidity and heat of North America. But that's it, It wasn't to be, but my goodness, getting to a final is no mean feat. And we had a bit of cheer on the way. And as I say, the flags will fly again, everybody. We'll get there. A massive thank you to everyone who's listened, supported and engaged with us during this tournament. If you've enjoyed following us, then please leave us a 5-star review wherever you're listening. It really helps the show and will help us continue to grow heading into next season and beyond. So once again, thank you so much for listening and joining us for this incredible ride that's been Euro 2024. We love doing the Ramble, as you know, but the tournaments are particularly special.
Yeah. It's a pretty good deal for you guys, the listeners, right? You get 20-odd shows, all completely for free if you want to not pay for them. All you've got to do is flick your phone open and leave us a 5-star review, we'll call it quits. We'll call it quits. And if you want to be one of our favourite listeners, of course, you go to patreon.com/Football Ramble. But all we're asking for is a little 5-star review. Won't take you long. Talking basically, to be perfectly honest, as cringe as it sounds, how great we are. and other people can find us more easily.
How great Andy is, and we just happen to be in his shadow.
There's a reason we brought Andy in.
And also, we met a lot of listeners at the watch along. I've bumped into quite a lot of people in the street over this tournament, and it's just honestly, thank you for listening.
Yeah.
Thank you for making this it is as much fun as it sounds like it is doing this job, and you are a massive part of it, and we appreciate it.
The reason Andy's here is because we were a government under pressure. We thought we're bringing a military man as foreign secretary. That'll sort us out. That'll give us a lot of kudos. Yes, he can have his own show as well, but he needs to come here twice a week.
Oh dear.
You're watching a clip from the Football Ramble podcast. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss an upload. A single upload. Don't miss out on the uploads. The uploads are important.